Metroid Dread. I can still remember trying to play Super Metroid for the first time when I was much younger, and I couldn't really get into it because it was too atmospheric, too foreboding. In a nutshell, it scared me a little too much. It just did its job too well for me at the time. But now that I've gotten older and I can enjoy scary games now because, you know, I'm not a big baby. Shoot! Okay, maybe I'm still a little bit of a baby, but my point is, I really enjoy the Metroid series now, and Metroid Dread is my favorite side-scrolling 2D Metroid game of them all. Probably because I don't have that nostalgia for Super Metroid. I didn't play it in its heyday. I played it many, many years later, and while I really enjoyed it, I just love the modern take on the 2D Metroid series with Metroid Dread, and I like a lot of what it was trying to do. So the first thing I love about Metroid Dread is how it looks. It has great looking varied environments, a lot of depth to the backgrounds, the lighting is top notch, definitely giving that game that kind of haunting, foreboding atmosphere that it's going for, and it has a good use of color. Not too much to take away from the mood that the game is going for, but enough to make the game pop where it needs to. And I really loved how Samus moved in this game, whether it was her countering enemies at the exact right moment, and then us as the player being rewarded with a cool in-fight cinematic that always looked great and over the top, or just her Aeon shifting in and out of enemy range, just a blur of light that nothing can touch. They did a great job of making Samus just look straight up cool in this game. And Metroidvania games as a whole, they're a genre that I very much got into over the last few years. It's not one I immediately fell in love with when I was younger, and I'm definitely becoming more and more fond of this genre as time goes on because there's just been some great games in it. Metroid Dread, Hollow Knight, and I could go on and on and on. But in Metroid Dread's case in particular, it's got a sprawling map. It looks really daunting to navigate at a glance, but it's actually quite easy to read. It's very accessible for the player. I didn't really have many problems with it. I did get lost a few times going through the game, but I think about 90% of the time I could kind of figure where I was going. Where I usually ran into problems was when I would get a new ability, I'd all of a sudden kind of need to figure out where do I need to use this ability in order to progress further into the game. And I would get lost a few times, but usually where you needed to go was generally quite close to where you would get a new ability. Sometimes it would be in the area you're already in or not too far into an adjacent area. So I didn't really mind getting lost. It didn't happen frequently enough for me to get really irritated with the game. But something that Metroid Dread did amazingly well was just its sense of player progression and reward. I felt like I was being rewarded playing Metroid Dread at the perfect time always, in terms of Samus getting stronger and me having new abilities to use. I felt like just as I was getting used to an ability, or if I just felt like I was starting to crave a new ability, it was always right around the corner. And that kept me playing the game. I just wanted to keep playing until the next ability, and just to see what I would get and how I could use it within the game, whether it was combating enemies or just being able to traverse the map in a more expedited manner. And I can't remember the last time a game really did that to me, just at such an excellent pace. So Metroid Dread gets high marks for that alone. And I haven't even really touched on the combat, and I loved it. It's got the classic 2D side-scrolling combat that the classic Metroid series is known for. They do an exceptional job with it in this game. I enjoyed it the entire experience. While the more basic enemies could be quite easy to figure out, there were mid-boss battles that were always a joy. The major bosses themselves were great. The endgame boss in particular was a thrilling fight. Absolutely loved it. I wish I could erase my memory and experience everything Metroid Dread had to offer again for the first time. That's how much I enjoyed this first experience with it. And then there's obviously the dread part about the game, the E.M.M.I robots that you have to run away from because they're much too powerful for you to fight. And instead of Metroid Dread, it should be Metroid, holy crap, these robots stress me the hell out. I wasn't so much dreading them as I would just be stressed to the max whenever I was trying to run away or hide from them. But I still think they did a pretty great job with this sequence. And as they've said in developer interviews, they couldn't really create the game they wanted with the technology at hand, and they kind of had to wait until now in order to do so. And I'm glad they did, because these robot chases were generally quite a fun portion. They could be quite frustrating because they would chase you down and then you could counter them with very precise timing. Usually it was a lot of luck involved. And it was so frustrating because I would counter these robots, run away, get away from them, and then they'd chase me down 2 seconds later and still kill me. Yes, it could be frustrating, but it was all part of the fun too. And I really liked the difficulty in Metroid Dread. It wasn't too easy, wasn't too hard. I think it was definitely a little bit of a more challenging title, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love being punished by the enemy and then learning what makes them tick and how they move and then punishing them right back. And like all the other 2D Metroid games, they're not long games. This game, at 100% completion, getting absolutely everything, it only took me 12 hours. But it was a quality, high quality 12 hours at that. And to go with those 12 hours of gameplay, we get some nice atmospheric tracks that the Metroid series is known for. They did their job quite well. And we got some really good boss themes as well that definitely amped up the tension when necessary. But if there was a crown to be given when it comes to atmospheric music in the Metroid series, I would still probably give it to Super Metroid, just because if anything, I still hear that music and I'm still haunted by it from my childhood. So maybe it could be nostalgia and memories mixed in there too, but having gone back and re-listened to them for this review to just make sure I was being as objective as I could, I think Super Metroid is still just a bit better. And for Metroid Dread's story, I enjoyed it. Metroid games generally aren't known for their expansive narratives, but what there was in Metroid Dread, I did enjoy, but I'm a huge nerd. I love lore and going on wikis and reading about games and backgrounds of miscellaneous characters. I enjoy that kind of thing, so I enjoy whatever I get usually. But I did enjoy how it was trying to kind of flesh out and solve the lingering mysteries revolving Samus, particularly when it comes to the Chozo race that has been teased since the series' inception. But the one thing I could have used a bit more of was the game's main villain, Ravenbeak, because he looks great. He's a fantastic boss to fight. And I just love him so much aesthetically speaking. I could have used just a little bit more of him in the game's narrative. But all in all, I am quite happy with what we were given in terms of story in Metroid Dread. And even though it's not the longest of games, Metroid Dread is a quality experience. I still think it's worth the full price of admission, and it does have a hard mode that is unlocked after beating the game as well. So there is some replayability to it. Not a lot, but some. Metroid Dread is in my top 10 best games for the Nintendo Switch. And I'd have to sit down and take a look at the list, but it could even be higher, possibly even top 5. It's that good. And as always, thank you for joining me for this game break. If you have any thoughts or opinions you'd like to share, definitely let me know in the comments below. And all of you, have a nice day, okay? Take it easy.